Right, good morning, folks. Good evening, wherever you're at. I am joined today by rugby journalist extraordinaire James Weil from Planet Rugby Man. How are you going, sir?
I'm just about getting there, Mark. Feeling pretty tired from all the travelling. Back at home
Yes.
this week. Back out
Yes.
to Lille on Friday.
Yeah, you are at home. You have the luxury. It kind of, I never get, because I've never been to Europe. It kind of blows my mind just how easily you guys can get about. Like from New Zealand, the closest place we can go is Australia, and that's a 3-hour flight. So you guys have got it pretty good that you can just pop across the channel and go enjoy some rugby. What's it been like, man?
I think it's been a quite incredible experience. I mean, the biggest takeout for me is just how France, as a nation, have gone
Right.
rugby. It's everywhere. And you can kind of compare this to 2007. Because I was out there in 2007 as well. And the interest levels from the man in the street, the shopkeepers, and so on and so forth, there's a real frisson of excitement, you know,
Mm.
and there's a real pride that uh, France are in it to win it. And I think it was really summed up when I crossed over in the Eurotunnel to the England game against Chile.
Right.
The French customs guy, stopped me, grabbed my passport, and he could see my Rugby Cup World Cup accreditation.
Right.
And he went into a tirade of absolute woe about Dupont. And this is like the
Oh,
French passport
yes.
guy,
Yeah.
désolé, monsieur Dupont, c'est très mal. And, it was hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great to hear because I mean I know France. I mean, from what I understand, it's got a bit of a geographic divide as to where like the rugby hub is. I mean, when I look at the map of where a lot of the top 14 clubs are, there's a lot of them scattered around the south of France. Obviously, a couple of clubs, up north, up in Paris and whatnot. But I was from here in New Zealand, it seems like they've embraced the World Cup like no other. I mean, it just seems like the vibe. I mean, I experienced a little bit of it in 2011 when I went to the opening. Well, it wasn't the opening game, but the pool game between New Zealand and France in 2011, and there was a one corner of French fans who were just jumping up and down and going gangbusters, crazily passionate behind their team. And that was like just one little away section. So you're there and they're at the home side. It just must be, 1,000 times more.
Well, I think the France New Zealand game, I was really privileged to be there. And it was almost ground zero in rugby terms. Two of the
Right.
best four sides in the world playing each other in the home of the host nation. First game up in the World Cup. And I think one thing that a lot of pundits have overlooked, it was quite punchy by France. France control their own
Mm.
schedule. And it's quite punchy by France to say, right, we're going to play the All Blacks front up. We're going to play
First
them
up.
first game. And I think that was quite a punchy decision. That first game, the fans were just absolutely incredible. But I don't think I've ever seen chaos quite like it in terms of getting to the ground, and
Okay.
it was exacerbated by 40 degrees of heat in on the Parisian metro.
I was going to ask you about the heat because that first week seemed from a distance just to be unbearable. Like the amount of handling errors just seemed far greater than normal. And I was putting a large part of that down to the heat. Was it that bad as it looked?
Yes, I mean, look, as you know, I'm a very keen cricketer, and I've played in South Africa and Australia and stuff. And I have never experienced heat like this in any sports stadium before. It was the hottest I've ever experienced.
I say
Um,
something.
and we were just dripping because it was incredibly humid as well. And
Right.
the trip on the RER, which is it's almost a metro and it's almost a normal train service from
Okay.
the centre of Paris to the ground, people were actually melting. And I think very sadly, this was all brought home to us by when we got into the press box. One of the French journos actually had a minor heart attack
Oh
due to
God.
the heat. It really was that hot. And looking at the players on the pitch, with the likes of Greg Aldrich, Flamont dispense with their scrum caps, their
Yeah.
habitual scrum cap wearers. Francois Cross not playing with his base layer. It was
Right.
ridiculously hot. And I think um, the for the people that were watching at home to actually understand that it wasn't only the heat, but it was the humidity as well.
Right.
Um, there were so many handling errors in those first games. The grounds also got quite damp because of the humidity. And I think it was a feature, certainly, of the first two rounds with a number of simple handling errors that we saw that have been
Yeah.
dropped to the floor.
Yeah, I'm a big stats guy, and I looked at the handling error stats, and it just seemed to me a pattern across, especially the opening round, like just so much higher than normal. But how was it the last like round that you were over there? Has it like noticeably kind of become back to more normal?
Yeah, well, pleasantly warm, but also there's a big difference. I mean, France is a big country, and
Yeah.
I was up in the north part of France for the latter stages. And ironically, Marseille was a lot cooler than Paris. But that was because of the sea breeze. But the Lille Stadium is it's incredibly airy. Now you'll see those light tubes on the outside. That's a completely open circulation area, so it's
Okay.
naturally ventilated. It's absolutely magnificent stadium, and that's the other thing I'd like to say is the quality of the stadia that are in France
Right.
is ridiculous. Every one is an architectural masterpiece.
What's the in stadium experience like? Like here in New Zealand, we often complain that the stadium experience can be a little bit dry. It can be a little bit lacking atmosphere. The queues for beverages often extend very long. The queues to get in as you go through bag checks can be very long. And then there's like, getting on Wi-Fi because, a lot of the experience now for fans when you go to a game is not just to go to the game and watch the rugby. It's about, sending an Instagram post or, something like that. Like, what's it like once you actually get in there?
Well, I think it's hard to give a binary answer on this because the fan experience is an interactive one. So it depends on the group of fans that you're with. I think to unpack that, the first thing is it's got better as the French authorities have softened their stance to certain things around the ground. Now, if you take the England-Argentina game in Marseille, I was in the press box at the time of kickoff, and I thought, crikey, I thought they'd sold this ground out. There were so many empty seats. And then 2 minutes later, one of the journalists from the Daily Mail tweeted a picture of the fans outside the stadium trying to get in.
I think I saw that one. I saw the picture of just the fans just queued up, and then there was the ground, like with the game pretty much ready to kick off next to it, right?
Yeah, and this hasn't been helped. There's been quite a powerful police presence at all the games, and I think that's been down to two factors. One is some of the French experience at the Champions League football.
Right.
Has maybe made them go a little bit belt and braces on things. But secondly, I'm told by the officials at World Rugby that the French authorities have also seen this very much as an opportunity to rehearse their tactics for the Olympics. So a lot of what you've seen is their preparation for the Olympics. And that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, a bit of a dry run, I guess, for the bigger event, which is still on the horizon.
Yeah.
But what's it been like for you, like as a journo getting into the stadiums? Have you been patted down? Have they been searching your bags? Have you had to show 6 forms of ID?
I think it was complicated in the first instance that the accreditation for the tournament, it didn't matter what you were, whether you were a journalist, a hot dog seller, the chief of police, or whatever. You had to go in the same queue to pick up your tournament accreditation. And I turned up there, and there was a 4-hour queue in 35 degrees of direct sunlight.
Ouch.
Yeah, and I have to admit, I was very happy that I got a few World Rugby numbers in my phone. And after a few furious WhatsApp messages.
You leveraged a few connections, James.
Yeah,
I see. You didn't just be a sucker and stand in a 4-hour queue.
Well, I did get a response back from World Rugby. Who said, "Well, I bloody well told you to get here yesterday and pick it up the day before," with a big exclamation mark. But in fairness, I was actually doing a piece to camera in the ground, so I had a good excuse to get fast tracked.
Right.
But it was, in terms of the journalistic experience, it's quite strange because some of it has been absolutely brilliant and some of
Okay.
it really, really poor, and there's not much middle ground. So examples of really great practice. The way that the press conferences have been run in different languages with apps for translation, that's been really fantastic.
Right.
The way that, I think we all understand the need for sustainability in life these days. And the fact that rather than giving out little cardboard ref links with every program, that World Rugby have created an app where you just log on, you put your own headphones into your mobile phone, and you can listen to the referees and the commentary.
Oh, well, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And the fact that every ground you go to, the Wi-Fi, once you've been accredited on the Wi-Fi for your mobile phone and the computer, every single Wi-Fi connection in the grounds is identical. So you just
It's good to
automatically
go. Oh,
yeah,
that's nice and smooth.
yeah. But in terms of the security, yeah, they have been difficult at times, and I think there's a few instances of journos' water bottles being seized because they weren't official World Rugby branded water bottles. World
Oh,
Rugby.
that seems to be overzealous.
Yes, yes.
I thought you were
There
going to
isn't.
say they were worried about the contents of the water bottles. Like I've been through security checks before where security made me drink the water to make sure that it wasn't something nefarious. They had to visibly check me drinking it before they would let me go through security. That was in China where they're pretty, they can be pretty strict at certain, parts of the, security checks. But yeah, that's about the branding.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if I go to China, I'll remember to put a gin and tonic in my water bottle so I make drink before the
Yeah,
flight.
definitely do that. Definitely do that. The press conferences, though, it's good that you touched on that because I've noticed as a viewer of press conferences, one thing that grinds sometimes my gears, but also a lot of fans' gears, and you'll see it in the comments on YouTube videos, is when you can't hear the question that's being asked, but because I guess they've got the translation going on, the journos are having to wait for the microphone. So the interpreter is able to interpret the question and then feed it through the translation. But for us, that also means that the questions are being picked up so we know what question is being asked. Like often you don't need to hear the question, you can tell from the answer what's being asked. But like some of the questions Eddie Jones has been answering, he's been pretty terse. And if you didn't hear the question, you'd have no idea about what he's been asked.
Well, I think Eddie's been box office in terms of, you got to. I'm going to take him a bag of croissants. He said he wasn't here for the croissants, so. But Eddie's been absolutely box office. Yes, we do get a roving mic, and we can probably hear it. I'm surprised you say that because we can hear it very, very audibly within those rooms. But you also have to understand that there are different stages to the press conferences. So you're only seeing 1/3 of the full access. And to talk you through that, you have what we call the top table, which is the thing that you would see on YouTube.
Right.
After that, there is generally what we call a writer's briefing, which is one-on-one time. This is certainly how England work and also how France work. One-on-one time with the coaches to selected journalists in a very close environment. And normally that will be embargoed for 12 or 24 hours so that there is a release of information and people are getting a drip feed of information rather than one big hit of it.
Sure.
And then after that, there is the mixed zone player interviews, which have gone really, really well in fairness. And they've been handled very, very well. There is a little nuance, and you might have seen about this on Twitter, that the England rugby journos, we have an agreement with England Rugby that we have something called a flash interview. The flash interview is normally with the player of the match or a selected player, who we then send one of our members down to the tunnel or to the mix zone, and they literally interview the player as they come off the pitch in kit. Now,
Wow.
in the England-Chile game, apparently the communication between the England comms team, the World Rugby comms team, and the French security didn't quite happen.
Oh.
And there was a pretty unedifying spectacle of one of the journalists being physically removed by French security in the middle of an interview with Henry Arundel. Now, this was on Twitter, and I think in the heat of the moment, people have emotional reactions, and in the cold light of day, I'm sure things have quietened down a bit. But it was a pretty unedifying spectacle. But this was possibly down to poor communication between the various press authorities. But other than that, the access has been okay.
Right.
I think in terms of midweek access, that would be the thing that we'd be most critical of. It's been a little bit controlled, and it's been a little bit short and sharp. The exception to that would be the South Africans. I think they've been, Andy Colquhoun and the South Africans have been a lot more open, perhaps, than the other nations. But equally, they've got arguably, other than France, the biggest audience to appeal to.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. What's the atmosphere like in the press conferences, though? Just because when I'm watching them, like even teams who have been successful in their matches and their post-match games, it just feels tense. Like there seems to be a heightened level of tension. Is that just because it's a World Cup and everyone's under a lot of pressure? Like it just seems a little bit less jovial than normal.
Okay, that's interesting because you see this from a distance. And I think what you're saying kind of resonates with me, and I have an idea why. Generally, when we attend press conferences, the rugby writers have known throughout our careers the various press officers from the various big nations. Up until 18 months ago, Joe Locke in New Zealand, great character, the comms manager for the team for many, many years. Tim Percival at England, Andy at SA Rugby, Adrienne at French Rugby. And those guys generally lead the pressers at the top table. Now, a nuance of the World Cup has been that World Rugby have actually led that press conference. So you have an intermediate party brokering the press conference to the audience. So that little bit of connectivity, that personal relationship where you knew Joe Locke or you knew Tim Percival or whoever has kind of gone. The other thing is that the language thing, I have to take my hat off to Michael Checker, who gave press conferences in three different languages.
He did three languages. Who was his other one?
Pardon?
What was his other one? He did English, Spanish, and we did Italian or something.
French.
Oh, French. Wow.
Yeah.
Impressive.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that can be quite confusing is that if you're not listening to the translations, the same question can be asked twice in two different languages.
Right.
And that's happened on a number of occasions. But equally, the media schedules that the players have had are absolutely ridiculous. And I think there is a genuine desire to get them in and get them out reasonably quickly. Especially in that heat, they're going to be knackered after 80 minutes of rugby. There's a lot more emotional pressure on them than there are in normal test matches. So I think what you have is a load of forces converging just to make it a little bit more dumbed down and possibly a little bit more formal than we've experienced in the past.
Right. Yeah, I wondered who that person was. I assumed it was some kind of mind of them, but the World Rugby person you mentioned, I've listened to enough press conferences to know the voices of those, regular reps from each of the teams, and then you can hear they know the journalists by their first names. They just, they call them out by first name. But when the World Rugby people have been doing the kind of introductions, we're sitting down with, and then they have to look at their notes like Jacques Ninaba, they don't even really know. It's
Michael.
doesn't make. Yeah, exactly. it's been a little bit awkward, I guess. So I guess that makes a bit of sense. What have you made of like what's it like just walking around the streets outside the games? Are there a lot of people wearing the rugby kits around? Are there any fans which are out in particular numbers? I mean, when I looked at the Irish game against South Africa, geez, there seemed to be a lot of Irish people in that crowd. But I guess it depends which city you've been in and which games are being played.
I mean, Ireland South Africa was one of the most deafening stadium experiences you'll ever experience. It was absolutely ridiculous. And what was ironic is because Ireland are playing South Africa, it's just a sea of green.
It's just green.
It's just green. And I think the Irish and South African fans, sometimes I think we see the worst of some of the South African fans on social media, but actually when you get in a stadium with them and you have beers with them, they're some of the best fans around, certainly some of the most knowledgeable. But the biggest, I think the most impressive set of fans have been Chile. And firstly, I think they've got one of the best kits in the tournament. It's incredibly
it's beautiful. Yeah.
But when they played in Lille, there's a big concourse area outside the stadium in Lille, and they had traditional dancing Chilean bands, and literally the crowd around them, videoing them, joining in. It was a beautiful sort of mellow summer's autumnal day. Beers were flowing, and it was a really great party atmosphere, and that was down to the Chileans. They have been incredible, and the amount of support they've brought has been overwhelming. Everybody's remarked upon it, and I think I told you off camera that during the national anthems, there was this chap who told me he was like the #1 sports writer in Chile, and he was there in his Chilean shirt behind me, literally bellowing out the national anthem with tears rolling down his face. And I turned around and looked at him. I just started sobbing for him. It was just so emotional. And then of course Chile had that first 5 minutes where they could have, should have, would have scored that. And I think he'd been the most popular scorer in the stadium.
It seems like the fans are really getting behind the underdog teams as a thing. Like they are loving any team which is up against it. Although we haven't really had any kind of big time upsets. I mean, I know Fiji beat the Aussies, but Fiji's been going into this tournament in a pretty good state, and Eddie Jones picked a young squad, so one could argue that one was already a bit of a coin toss anyway. But the fans certainly seem to be loving the underdogs.
Well, I think you've hit upon something there, because when you and I did the podcast with Sergio and Chris, we talked about it being the tournament of the underdog, but we've not seen an overturning yet. And actually, I would probably suggest to you that given the form into the tournament, if I look at the Fijian side, the one thing I always look at is how many genuine world-class players are in each side. Top 3 players in their position in the world. And you look at Fiji, and they've probably got 4 in that category. Both of their centres, Semi Radradra and Luani Bhatia.
Bhatia is amazing,
machine. And those that you've got 4 absolute world-class players there. So Fiji turning over Australia, and I think one of the things I'm sure we will talk on is the officiating. I think the officiating has been brilliant throughout the tournament, much better than people are perhaps suggesting on social media. But if there was one game where I did scratch my head a little bit, it was the Fiji-Wales game. And I think Fiji drew the short straw in that one. As much as I respect Matt Carley, I don't think he had a particularly good game. But I look at that and I think to myself, well, all Fiji are doing are delivering what we expected from them. They're meeting expectations.
That's right.
I pity any side that faces them in the quarterfinals or the semi-finals, because they've got those 4 world-class players that can change games.
That's right. Game breakers. What have you made of the rugby generally? I mean, there's been a fair few big score lines, teams getting 80, 90 points, which don't make for that much of a kind of edgiest seat spectacle.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you say that, and I think, look, in terms of big results and turnovers of the tournament. The All Black victory against Italy, I think, surprised everybody because
Oh, for
Italy
sure.
are a very, very good side, and to see them blown away like that, I actually had a day off and I scrolled through the game and I was thinking, what on earth is happening here?
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's been an outlier of all the games.
yeah.
But equally, I think that even in those big defeats, we've seen a lot of great play from the emerging nations in 2/3 of the pitch. The difference
Right.
between the established nations and the emerging nations is their efficiency in the red zone. That's the big difference, is the sheer firepower they've got in attack. But we've seen great defensive systems. We've seen some really great set pieces. I mean, Tonga's set
Yeah,
piece is as good as anybody's.
that's right.
Big Ben is my player of the tournament so far. I'm going to
He's
tell you
been fantastic, hasn't
I'll tell you what, if he was, I actually wrote in my piece, if he was South African, he would be president of South Africa, because they love the props over there. I mean, he's got it
he?
all. He's got it all.
Yeah.
This, but he's so
He's,
charismatic. But going
yeah.
back, the Tongan set piece, their line out, their scrum is absolutely test quality. And what we haven't seen is sides blown away in those areas. The difference has been in the last third of the pitch.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we've still got one round to go. We may see the odd upset yet, but I mean the clashes between the big, like the favorites, like France, New Zealand, South Africa, Ireland, we still have seen some proper arm wrestles as well to kind of balance things out, I guess. And we've still got Scotland, Ireland to come, which is going to be, and Japan against Argentina is also going to be, a bit of an edge if you see what I think.
Well, Scotland. I mean, looking at Scotland, Ireland. I think you and I were talking about this. I've broken the sides down into what I call the 150-30 sides. Sides that are scoring almost 150 points and conceding 30. And I think it's a truism that every side that has won a Rugby World Cup has had virtually the best defensive record in the tournament. Now, ironically, England's got the best defensive record so far.
Yeah,
Not that I'm
that's been
suggesting.
amazing.
Yeah, 22 points conceded. But then you have the big four, all have conceded around the 30 point mark, all have scored around 150 points. New Zealand leading the pack at 180. However, when you look at Ireland, Scotland, I think that when you look at the Scots side, they have one of the most thrilling backlines in the world. There is no doubting their ability to score points, a lot of points. Against Ireland, their biggest challenge is getting enough ball to score those points. If they can hit 45% possession, then we know statistically they're going to score between 20 and 30 points. So Ireland have to match that. Is it a done deal? I don't think it is. And I also think Scotland will go into this. There's Finn Russell's personal character is a big part of that Scottish side.
Sure.
And Finn Russell is the sort of bloke that if he sees a big guy in the bar, he'll punch him on the nose and run away, and laugh in his face. That's Finn Russell's character.
Yeah.
And I think Scotland are going to go into this game thinking, well, we've got a free hit here.
Yeah.
It's we cannot fail. Even if we get thrashed, we've done our best. And do you know
That's
what?
right.
There's something around that Scots side that I really, really like. I like Jamie Ritchie's leadership. I think he's a really charismatic leader. And I think he's got a good chance of getting the Lions captaincy in 2025 if he can control his own discipline around rucks. A little bit of an issue there. But I do think that we always talk about winning runs. And one thing that is true about a winning run is sooner or later it comes to an end. So when does Ireland's winning run come to an end? It comes to an end when they come up against a side that scores a lot of points. Could it be Scotland? I don't think it will be, but there's part of me that really hopes it is, because I think the Scots need rewarding for the style of rugby and the brand of rugby they play.
Yeah. They're one of the best sides to watch just visually. They're fantastic. But I mean, like you said, if they come up against the side, I mean, look at the game against South Africa. If you'd watched that game against South Africa and you were new to rugby, you wouldn't have known that Scotland's attack is one of the most prolific in world rugby, right? They were kept remarkably quiet.
We talked about defensive records, and again, a shout out for Tonga to score 3 tries, even though
against South Africa. Oh my goodness!
You don't score 3 tries in a Test match against South Africa, not very often.
No, not at a World Cup.
Yeah, so if you look at South Africa's defence, I think they've conceded 34 points. Well, 15 of those were against Tonga. 15 tries, 3 tries against Tonga. And I think that the Scotland-South Africa game really showed to me what a powerful side South Africa is. South Africa-Ireland was a very interesting one because when you look at that, Ireland were fantastic, but South Africa had more than an opportunity to overturn them. If they'd
either side could have won that game.
Yeah, if they'd have nailed their kicks, they were home and hosed. And I still think that between the top 3, and my jury is out on New Zealand at the moment, but Ireland, France, and South Africa, I don't think there is. There's 3 points between any of those sides on their day.
What about France with all these injuries? Geez, the one guy you didn't want to get injured was bloody Antoine Dupont. It's given me nightmare flashbacks of 2011 Dan Carter.
Well, I told you the customs guy at passport.
Yeah.
He actually talked to me about Dupont as I was checking into Eurotunnel. But look, Dupont is back. He'll be fit for the quarterfinals. I've never quite bought into the hyperbole about losing Romain Ntamack because I think the drop off between him and Jalibert is so minimal.
Right.
You know, it's like Bowden Barrett, Richie Mwanga, Damien McKenzie. Right. I mean, you know, each player has a certain style, and you can't really choose between them as who is the best player. They deliver a certain style. Right. But I do think Jalibert is the better 80-minute player. And if you go back to the top 14 final, Romain Ntamack for 79 minutes was bloody awful. And then in 1 minute...
He gets the glory at the end.
It's incredible.
That's all people remember. That's all you remember.
Yeah. But I think from France, from an injury perspective, I still think they're 5% underpowered without Paul Willemse. I think that he was lost for them because he put the steel into their pack, the real power into their pack. And I think against South Africa and also Ireland, you know, if you look at the physicality of Ireland, it's very underrated. The likes of Andrew Porter and James Ryan.
James Ryan. Oh my God, he's such a player. He's everywhere as well. For such a big human to be able to just hit rucks and then get up off the ground and make a tackle like again and again and again and again. It's a sight to behold.
Well, if you I think within the British press there is a little bit of a running joke that Leinster and Ireland are the same side, give or take, and that's with due respect to Peter O'Mahony, Ty Byrne, and Bundy Aki, and so on. But I think that when we saw the La Rochelle Leinster European Champions Cup final, when James Ryan went off after 23 minutes with an HIA, Leinster's physicality at the breakdown dropped massively. And I think for all their superstars, and Bundy Aki, you know, undoubtedly the player of the tournament so far, I think James Ryan is such a vital cog in their wheel because he's the guy that will go toe-to-toe with the likes of Ebenet Tibet and the big boys of rugby and not back down.
He's also come through Irish rugby at a time where he's just been winning everything basically his entire career. He's never had any kind of I mean, I guess at the last World Cup, there's a bit of negativity, but like he came through at a time where, you know, Ireland was on the rise under Joe Schmidt and Leinster was winning everything. So he's just a winner. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think he's developed in the last 3 years from being a very talented ball playing lock into being a physical specimen. And I think a lot of S&C have gone into that. But, you know, you asked about those 3 big sides. And, you know, I know you've got a lot of Kiwis tuning into your channel. And the one thing I did reflect that when I have seen New Zealand is how important their straight runners at 12 and 6 have been. And against France, without Geordie Barrett and without Frizzell, just how lateral New Zealand were against, admittedly, probably the best organised defence in the world.
That's it.
Yeah, but France were able to push and keep pushing New Zealand, and New Zealand going between the trams. And I've not seen that from an All Black side very often. Normally, they're very direct and very accurate. And I think that maintaining the fitness of Barrett and Frizzell is absolutely key for New Zealand's hopes.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, Frizzell's been having a career year for sure. He's actually genuinely looked like our big ball carrying six who's going to get us over the advantage line. And Geordie Barrett is a massive human. Like having a guy like him at 12 who's also got that skill set that he's got from all those years playing at fullback, and I mean he's played at 10 for the All Blacks before as well. He's going to be a handful for anyone when he's fit. And then the fact that we've now got Lomax, he was on the bench for that last game, fit after that big cut that he got on the leg against South Africa, I think. The scrum, the set piece against Italy was, I know they had Fischetti go off pretty early, but, the set piece was one area I looked at it and I was like, man, Riccioni and Fischetti are bloody good props. Like, we maybe have a little bit. Nah, but we look fine at the end of it.
Well, Fischetti's got 3 broken ribs.
Yeah, that's nasty.
So, yeah. But I think, look, I think there's also part of this as well that sides grow into a Rugby World Cup. We've seen that in virtually every single World Cup that's been played. And I think, South Africa in 19, South Africa in 2007 are really great examples of that. Australia in 99, a really, really good example. And Ireland at the moment are the form side. I think France and South Africa are probably at a similar place, but I think New Zealand are the side that are on the biggest upslope. Well, New Zealand and England actually, and Wales are on the upslope of improvement.
Yeah,
and actually we've not mentioned Wales.
Maybe we're sleeping on Wales a little bit because their performance against the Aussies was just incredible.
Yeah, and what Warren Gatland is the simplest bloke when it comes to rugby. He just breaks rugby down into its simplest components. There's no complexity about him. There's no BS about him. He just says it how it is. And I think that's almost reflected in the way Wales are playing rugby at the moment. Their defence is outstanding. They've got a very solid set piece. What they do have is one of the best maul defences in the game. Adam Beard.
Yeah, Adam Beard, his ability is he's all arms, isn't he? His ability to exactly.
Yeah, he's so disruptive in that maul situation.
Yeah.
But actually, we talked about scoring a lot of points. Scoring points against Wales is a difficult task for most sides. And they got what they managed to do as well is also find a very charismatic young leader in Jack Morgan, who's been one of the outstanding players in the tournament.
He's been incredible.
Yeah,
he's genuinely one of those players who can do a bit of everything. Like one of those. I mean, Adi Savi has a similar one from New Zealand point of view, but I mean, Jack Morgan, he can bloody kick. He can put kick balls through. He can win turnovers. He'll be your top tackler. He'll be your top loose forward for getting over the advantage line. He's just got everything about him. I love watching him. My surname's Morgan, so he's also got a special part in my heart as well. I need to find some family connection, get him to send me a jersey.
Now, most Kiwis actually claim Irish blood somewhere along, or Scottish blood. But you go for the Welsh. I think the other interesting thing about Wales is they've got I think 1, 2, 3 cap centurions. 4.
Yeah. We've got Smith, we've got Whitelock. Those guys are both really high up in the digits as well.
Yeah, and I think those sides that have got those great experiences to draw upon, and the cap centurions that Wales have got, they've got Faletau, North, Dan Biggar, Lee Halfpenny. These are all absolutely top quality test operators.
Yeah.
Especially Talupe Faletau, who's one of my favourite players I've ever. So
what are England going to do with Farrell back now and George Ford being in phenomenal form?
It's a very difficult one. Do you know what? One of my favourite books on sport is a book called The Art of Captaincy by Mike Brearley, the great England cricket captain. And one of the things that Brearley wrote in that book that will always stay with me is that to say you never change a winning side is as stupid as saying you always change a losing side, right? Just because a
Okay.
side wins doesn't mean to say you
Yeah.
can't improve it. And just because a
Sure.
side loses doesn't mean to say it wasn't the best side available.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I look at where England are with Owen Farrell, and I'm probably one of his biggest supporters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I see a bloke, and I've told you the story before, that after his shoulder shot against Gloucester in the Premiership in January, who knew that he was under pressure from that shoulder hit, who then walked outside the ground, lined 200 kids up in the pouring rain, and stood there for an hour and a half signing autographs. That's
Yeah.
Owen Farrell, right?
They don't show that though. That doesn't make headlines.
No, it doesn't. But that's Owen Farrell. He's an incredible human being.
Mm.
And he's also an incredible rugby player. And I think what's interesting is England have a choice. Farrell starts no matter what, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
he has to. As the captain, he's going to be, is it 10 or is it 12, basically?
Yeah, yeah. But you then have to ask yourself are England going to lose their midfield momentum that they've created by playing Manitou Lagi, Joe Marchant, and Ollie Lawrence as
Ollie Lawrence, yeah.
yeah. Between those three guys, they're incredibly physical, very direct. You put Owen at 12 and you lose that directness in the
It
12.
changes the dynamic 100%.
Yeah. So, as you've then got the other thing, and I think, certainly English watchers of your channel would know this, but George Ford and Owen Farrell lived next door to each other, have been brought up from the age of 4 together, and are
Is
the
that right?
very, yeah. Mike Ford and Andy Farrell were best friends, and
Oh,
those two kids have grown up playing rugby together since the age of 4.
right.
And I think that part of the decision would be down, believe it or not, to George and Owen. How do they feel that they can best contribute? And I think that Steve Borthwick can be a little bit wooden in press conferences, but there is such a feeling of freedom and of happiness when you interview the England players that probably wasn't existing 12 months ago. They
Is that
really,
right?
they really look comfortable in their own skin. They look happy. And I
Right,
think the part of the conversation will be between Owen and George about how do we think we can best come away with a result. There
right.
won't be
Set the
any,
team up best.
yeah, and Mark, there won't be any precocity about this. It won't be, well, I want to play. It will be what's
Right.
best for the team. And then
The
maturity.
team.
Yeah. What I
Wow.
would say is a lot of people get hung up on shirt numbers, right?
Sure.
And I do think that there is, looking at the way that England play, with a lot of kicking ability in their side, I do think there is a big argument to start Marcus Smith at 15. And the
I was
reason I
going to
say,
ask you that as well, Smith or Stewart at 15.
well, I don't think it's an either or. I think what you do is you play
Or Stewart
Stewart
on the wing, maybe. Yeah.
because if you play him on the left wing, now you know as well as I do that the majority of rugby takes place on the left hand side of the pitch
Yeah.
because of the way people kick. Most
Pass.
kickers,
Yeah. Kick. Yep.
yeah. So you put Freddie Stewart on the left wing, and you ask him to challenge the England aerial tactics to actually fight for the ball. You've got the best, arguably the best aerial back three player in the world challenging for the ball, and at the back you've then got Marcus Smith to weave his magic. Now that shirt numbers thing, I think in any given rugby situation, a one-on-one tackle can go, it's 50-50. So it doesn't matter if it's Marcus Smith or Freddie Stewart or whoever at the back. But what they will do, England play effectively a 12-1 defensive system. What they will do is they'll move those guys around the pendulum to suit the way the opposition's aerial game is going. So they don't have to be stuck on the wing or stuck at fullback.
Right.
They're fluid.
Yeah.
So, and Marcus Smith, I think, go back to Mike Brearley's book. The other thing he said in his book was always do the thing that the opposition least want you to do. Now, I know if I were playing against England, I saw Freddie Stewart on one wing and Marcus Smith at fullback, I think, actually, do you know what? There's a bit of threat there. And if I saw
Yeah.
Freddie Stewart at fullback and Johnny May at the wing, I'd be thinking, okay, this is an easy day at the office because neither of them really have got the gas. Johnny May had gas 2 years ago. I don't think he's got where he was.
I just caught up with them. Yeah. We saw that, I think, against Fiji, right? But prior to the World Cup, he got burned on the outside by, I think it was Ravel Tamanda or one of the Fijian wingers. So yeah, I still love Johnny May, but yeah, the Father Time's going to catch up with all wingers in that regard.
I'll tell you, England's biggest challenge, right, is how to get Tom Curry into the side.
Yeah, now that he's back available, eh? Is he
Ben,
available for the next game? He is, right?
yeah, he is. I mean, Ben Earl has been England's best back row forward by a mile.
Yeah.
Courtney Law starts at 6. Ben Earl starts at 7 or 8. And then they've got a straight shootout between Curry, Ludlam. Do they want the carrying of Billy Vunipola?
Billy V, yeah.
You know, how do you get Tom Curry into that back row?
That's a good problem to have. I mean, they're all pretty fine choices. You guys are not lacking for depth in the back row.
I think it's got to be Curry at 7 and Earl at 8, and I think that's what you'll see in the quarterfinals.
You think Billy V to come on for impact, or is it going to be Ludlam because he can be a bit of a useful impact sub?
I think honestly, Billy Vunipola's sort of point of differentiation was his power into contact. I think size have got a little bit bigger during his career. Billy's got a little bit slower. I don't think he's quite got the impact that he had. Lewis Ludlam, however, his post-contact meters are outstanding, and he has the ability to fight through in probably a similar way to Greg Aldrich. You know, Greg Aldrich into contact is a machine.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting Ludlam is in the same league as Greg Aldrich. You
know?
know?
But I get your point, yeah.
His ability to fight through contact is remarkable. And the other thing is that if you've got Billy on the bench to come on, you're covering one position. If you have Lewis Ludlam on the bench, you're covering 4 positions.
Covering the whole back row, basically, yeah.
Well, you're covering 4 positions because you've also got the alternative of putting Courtney up into the
second row. Yeah, for sure.
So Ludlam offers gives you four choices. Unfortunately, Billy just gives you one, although there's a few people that I know that might suggest he do a good job at tight end at his current weight.
Well, so he's a big unit, if nothing else.
I want to ask you a question. How's the public mood in New Zealand, and what's the feeling in terms of how the All Blacks are going?
You know, I'm yet to see somebody walking around Auckland in the current, 2023 Rugby World Cup kit. I'm yet to see one. I've seen them in the shops. They're on the shelves. They're for sale. You know, people where there's spots where there's people mingling around. I'm still yet to spot one. I don't feel like the World Cup fever has quite gripped the nation as it has in past tournaments, probably partly the fact that we lost the opener and then we played Namibia. And then I feel like a lot of New Zealand fans probably don't pay that much attention to how Italy's been progressing. And they just kind of thought, well, we should be mopping the floor. Although some New Zealand fans are saying, how the hell did we let Italy score those 2 tries? Like that's the main talking point of this game. So I don't feel like it's gripped us just yet. It may get there once we get to the knockout stages. If we win, assuming assuming we get to the big clash against the South Africa or Ireland or whoever it pans out, Scotland. If we get through that, then I feel like that'll grip the nation. But if we were to go out in the quarterfinal, then it'll just be one that kind of just slid on by. It also is influenced by the fact that our rugby league team, the one professional rugby league team here in New Zealand, had a best year in 10 years. So they attracted so much of the sporting headlines, as rugby league and rugby union kind of compete for that airtime. So the fact that they made essentially a semi-final before going out, where they're a team that doesn't even usually even make that out of the pool or the main group stages, that took a little bit of the wind out of the World Cup sails, I think. What's it like in England?
Look, England, you've always got the hardcore of rugby culture, and the periphery around that will buy into success. Now,
Okay.
as England have started to succeed, there's been a greater degree of interest. I
Right.
think that you've also got a number of forces going on within the game which don't help. Jersey Reds, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, just the administration, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that the landscape of the game at the moment is quite challenging. In point of fact, there's a press conference tomorrow, I believe England going to announce a move to central contracts. I don't know if you're aware of that.
No, I hadn't heard the news.
Yeah, so the model is going to be 20 hybrid contracts, as I understand it,
Mm,
where those elite players, in inverted commas, belong to England. So near enough the Irish model, for want
right.
of a better description.
Yeah.
But I think that's quite positive, and I think that um, as England's momentum has grown, so the public interest has grown. I also think that over the last couple of years, we've not been a particularly likable side. Um,
Mm,
and that likability is a really important thing. And I think when Steve Borthwick first took over, he circled the wagons and he wanted to create an internalised culture. And I think only now is he starting to reach out to the external support to embrace them because there was such a big job for him to do.
mm,
What has been great, I think England's social media for once has been outstanding. I think some of the things they did with Marler after the header and so on were
mm.
very,
That was
very,
hilarious.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And Joe to camera, well, of course, I mean, we practiced it,
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
what a load of
Yeah,
bullshit.
yeah, yeah. No, that was good stuff. Actually, it's interesting you make that point though, because I feel like the All Blacks under Ian Foster, the public has never really got behind him as a coach, which maybe also is part of the reason there's a bit of apathy towards just rugby in general at the moment, like our domestic competition over here, the level below Super Rugby, its attendance has been diabolical for a long time, and it continues on. And there's talks about whether that competition may be scrapped. When I was a child, pre Super Rugby, that competition was, it was fantastic. It was the be all and end all, basically. So, yeah, I'm hopeful. Once I know Scott Robertson coming in next year is not going to just magically wave a wand and suddenly all New Zealand rugby's problems will be, solved. But he will at least, I think, have a little bit more public support behind him. Unless he loses too many games, then that will quickly evaporate. But yeah.
Just to know, I just want to make 2 or 3 points just in response to that. First of all, I've never quite understood Ian Foster. Genuinely, in my experiences of interviewing on a number of occasions, he's one of the most open and honest people I've ever come across in the game.
Mm.
And I admit that he had massive boots to fill in terms of succeeding. One of the greatest All Black coaches of all time, Steve Hansen. But
Yeah.
I do take your point that the New Zealand public never quite embraced him in the way they did with Steve. I also think that New Zealand have got a number of players growing old together. And I think that's problematical because what I've not seen, and this is unusual for a New Zealand side, if you look at the drop off between a South African reserve player and their starting 15, there's nothing. Every single player is contributing to that side. Ireland, ditto. France, the same. Not sure that's happening within New Zealand at the moment. So I wonder about that regeneration process. And I think it's a really important part of Scott Robertson's tenure is to embrace that regeneration process and get it over with as quickly as possible and to fast track new talent into the game. The last point is, New Zealanders in sport are the epitome of understatement and overachievement. And that's something I really kind of respect the Kiwi culture. And, I would generally argue that New Zealand's achievements on the world sporting stage are almost unmatched for the size of the country. And I think there's something quite dangerous about where the All Blacks are at the moment because they've kind of just gone under the radar. A lot of people
Yeah.
have written them off. But I tell you, if they face one of those big nations in the quarterfinals, semi-finals, it comes back to what I said about Scotland. sheer firepower. New Zealand score points, and providing you've got that direction from 12 and 6, I think you'll go well.
Well, fingers crossed. We are, I think, all kind of cautiously optimistic, but then we looked at that South Africa Ireland game and thought, yeesh, those are some pretty good teams. So yeah, it's not going to be easy for whoever comes out on that side of the draw into the semifinals. So yeah, we'll have to see how things play out. What's your plan for the next few days? You back off to France shortly?
Yeah. So I'm doing the France, Italy, and England Samoa games,
Nice.
both of which I think will be a lot closer than people are thinking about. I think Italy need to react. They also probably come from the position that they know the French players inside out and back to front and vice versa. And I don't think that they will play as badly again.
Surely that can't happen. That was a once in a, that was both teams just, one rolled 100 and one rolled a 1. And then it was just, yeah.
But, and equally, I think France are in that invidious position of needing to retain momentum and selection momentum, but not wanting to get any more injuries. And that's a difficult one. So I think we'll see a mix and match French side. I know they're going to start. The one thing I do know is they're going to start Anthony Georges. I've had that being told from a very positive source. Luku obviously will start at halfback.
For sure, at 9. Yep.
Yeah, and I think they'll rest Jalibert and play Hastoy at 10, which probably takes away a little bit of their midfield attacking speed. Italy, again, despite the results against New Zealand, they've got some incredible attacking players. Juan Ignacio Brex, I think, has been one of the best outside centres in the world for the past 12 months. And their wings, their back three, can threaten any. So I think it'll be a lot closer. I still think France will win. England-Samoa is a big one because Samoa, if I look at the talent that they've got in their side, I think there's an argument to say they've been the underachievers in the World Cup, that they should than they've done. And I just feel that, again, familiarity. There's a lot of those Samoans play within Europe. They know the English boys well. And I just think that they're looking to punch somebody on the nose. And I think it will be a lot closer than people are first thinking about. And I also think that when England come up against sides with power runners, that's the one thing that troubles their defence. So I'll be very against Argentina, Japan, and Chile. There's not many big power runners in those sides, right?
Yeah, true.
Samoa, they'll go route 1. So I think that will be an interesting game. So yeah, I'm doing those two. I'm then back out for the quarterfinals, and then 2 weeks home run into the semis, which I cannot wait for. And then and that final, I couldn't tell you who I think will be in it, right? But I hope France are there. And the reason I say that is for the public interest, the atmosphere,
for sure,
and the noise.
Yeah. Same with New Zealand 2011. It's just something special when the home side is in the final, right? It's not the only time that the hosts have been in the final. It's just always, 995. I can remember that vividly, even though I was only a young fella. It's just something extra special. I would love to see them make it as well. So
would I. Anyway, I think we're back on recording next week with the two great men.
We are with the two captains, so we'll have to pick their brains as to how they see things are going to go. I'm cautious as to whether I should ask Sergio too much about that Italy performance against New Zealand. Maybe he'll have happier news based on how they play against France. We'll have to wait and see. I'm sure Chris is going to be pretty happy with how England's been going.
Chris is very, very happy. What I will tell you is we've got a couple of good stories about the boys to bring out in the next episode, one of which I think you'll enjoy.
All right, well, we look forward to it. Well, cheers, James, for coming along. We recorded for a little bit longer than we initially planned, but it was
that's
good
because
to catch up with you.
Talk bollocks about
we can talk rugby for too long. Yeah, I know. But we'll have to do this again sometime soon.
Cheers, mate. Really enjoyed it. Right. Take care.
Okay, mate. See you later.